Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champion Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games, we, Raffael Boccamazzo, a.k.a. Dr. B, and Mitra Jordan talk about I see, this is why I need to write a new one, because I was getting through it, and then I forgot. But anywho,
we talk about psychology here.
They're here to talk about important things, and I'm here to mess up intros. If you have any questions and you're here in the chat, you can put question : and then your question, and our awesome mods, Jordan and Mars, will grab them and put in a little text doc that we will talk about at the end of the episode. And today we're going to be talking about the hidden impacts of mental health diagnoses. But before we get to that, who are you two for the fine folks who may not know?
All right. I am Mitra Jordan, as you know. I mean, it says so right there. And
that was actually when I went, wait, it does say that there, right? I did put you both
I
in the
really
right
hope
situation.
so.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a registered clinical counselor, and I work in Victoria, BC. So I work with lots of different people, many of whom are interested in games. Wow, I'm being super vague. But I work with couples and individuals and youth and adults, I don't know. And we often talk about ways in which we can kind of leverage games and fun to kind of get through some of the challenges that we're presented with in our daily lives. As well as how it's just great to enjoy those things. Thank you very much. So anyway, yes, that's me.
Well, I'm Raffael Boccamazzo, better known as Dr. B for long Italian name reasons, as you can see below. I know people used to just look at my name and go, no. No. So anyway, I'm a clinical psychologist in Washington State. I'm the clinical director at what was the very first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community, TakeThis.org, and we're celebrating our 10th anniversary soon. We've been doing this for nearly a decade. I'm also an expert on the applied use of games in therapeutic and learning settings. I occasionally teach other clinicians how to do that. Had a nice article Wired this week about it. I got the last word. And I'm also a consulting psychologist for the YouTube channel How to ADHD and a self-advocate for autism and ADHD. Oh, Reaver 01, are you talking about Nicolas Cage?
Oh God.
If you're watching later on YouTube, you may be a little confused, but someone in the chat asked where the chicken was. Yes, we have Nicolas Cage standing by for any needed appearances. If you can't tell, we're in a very giggly mood because we were just making weird jokes before we started the show. So it's kind of like, oh no, oh God, I don't have any puppets. I got nothing. Oh, you know what? Here, I've got an owl bear. There we go. I painted this. I'm painting slime.
But you need no one but me.
Uh-oh.
'Tis the season.
I swear we're a serious show. I
We're
swear.
professionals. We are professionals. I mean, we can just really make this over the top and just go full. Yeah, there we go. All right.
Oh, there's the tiara. There it is.
The tiara hasn't been on the show in like 5 episodes, so we're just like.
I have a sparkly necklace.
I got nothing. I have nothing. Anywho, we're going to be talking about the hidden impacts of mental health diagnoses, and we're going to start this off the way that we normally start these off. Why are we talking about this?
Well, okay, so there's a lot of questions about what mental health looks like, and I've heard this throughout my career. It even irks me a lot of the times when I tell people I'm autistic, how often they say, well, you don't look autistic. And I didn't know there was like a badge or a sash we all need to be wearing or something to identify the fact that I'm autistic. But they get sassy answers and the level of sass is depending on the day. But there's a lot of hidden impacts that anybody struggling with a neurodevelopmental diagnosis, mental health diagnosis, learning disability deals with. And that has to do with the fact that we hide so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's not present all the time, the fact that there's societal pressures, the fact that there are secondary challenges we deal with that are not directly diagnostic for that. For example, the fact that I don't quote look autistic means that a lot of people get a little shocked when my autism presents itself. And there's complications involved in that because they see me as, I think, to use their terms, better than I am sometimes. They don't view it as a disability when in fact it is. And so this is a really complicated issue with a lot of different layers that I think a lot of folks with mental health challenges, neurodevelopmental diagnoses, don't necessarily make everybody aware of.
I think it's also hard to make people aware of it. You talk about your autism sometimes presenting itself, right? And I think one of the challenges with that is that then you have to kind of take care of other people's reactions to that as best you can. Like, I am in my life a very capable person, but there's times I really do struggle with my ADHD. And I am the first to admit at this point in the year, I start to experience some seasonal affective disorder as well. As we lose light, I lose my inner light sometimes a little bit. And it's tough because I am an upbeat and optimistic person. And it seems like when I'm not, it's hard for people to know how to be with me. And I do feel like I end up managing my behavior to manage their response, because we're always in relationship with others. And for a very simple kind of example that's different, say you're going through a grief process and someone died, and you're very careful usually about who you tell, because then you'll be managing their, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss response, right? Except with mental health issues, it's like it's always there. Sometimes you're managing it on your own behalf because you want to feel good today. So you might push yourself a little harder than you actually can. And if you're experiencing depression or anxiety or ADHD or whatever, or ASD, and you've just kind of pushed yourself that hard, you come home and you're exhausted. Somebody else can maybe still make dinner or get groceries, but you are done. And I think we talk about it as spell slots, we talk about it as spoons, but that's also one of the hidden impacts.
Yeah, it's shocking to me that I maybe it's the fact that all three of us deal with this on a certain level, that if you're new to watching this show, every single one of us is ADHD. And I don't mean that in a pejorative or snarky kind of, oh my God, I'm so ADHD kind of way. No, we are all three so ADHD officially. And the amount of effort, we didn't include effort in our pre-production meeting. The sheer amount of effort, the extra effort we have to put in to exist to other people's neuronormative standards. And that's not exclusive to ADHD. Think about somebody struggling with depression who, despite the fact that their entire world might feel gray, but they feel like they have to put on a happy face. Otherwise, they're left managing other people's expectations, like you said, and managing other people's sympathy and emotional involvement, it can be a job unto itself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, okay. That's the why we're talking about this. But one of the things that we have in here is and we talked a little bit about this. It was just like the effort and whatnot. Is the what gets in the way of this? So what gets in the way of us getting a diagnosis?
Oh, getting one in the first place?
Oh, I thought that's what it was in there, but like essentially what you had it as what gets in the way. So that's what I was presenting it as.
What gets in the way is nebulous typing on my part, and that's what really what gets in the way is the fact that I can see the movie that's playing in my head and you can't.
That's all of us.
Yeah,
that's just
relatable.
Generally, yeah, 100%.
Please.
Sorry, I think, well, I don't know if we've addressed this in previous episodes. I have a feeling we have talked about how difficult it is to get good mental health care.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean counselors and therapists, but also diagnosticians. Your MD can sometimes diagnose some of it, but more likely you'll either be dealing with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. If a psychiatrist, there may be long wait periods. Unless you're deemed you're in some kind of crisis. And even then, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the best or most thorough care. Especially right now, I know in Canada, we're certainly dealing with upheavals to our healthcare system. So psychiatric care is hard to come by. There's wait lists. Psychologists might be easier to see, but then you're paying out of pocket usually. Insurance might only cover so much.
Mm-hmm.
So really, access to care is, I'd say, one of the first barriers. Access to good care. Certainly, counseling can help manage the behaviors, right? So if you're dealing with a lot of, your therapist might look at it and go, wow, I'm seeing certain behaviors. I'm not diagnosing, but it's possible they fall under this one umbrella. But regardless, let's look at the behaviors. Let's see if we can get you in with your MD or a psychiatrist or something. So that may be fine, but you may really need the medication piece, and that may be also harder to come by or afford. So, yeah, access to care generally.
Access to care is a huge one.
Yeah.
One of the things I encounter in my practice a lot, because this is one of my biases, is education. And my experience is very few medical providers, behavioral health providers go out of their way to educate clients. Now, part of that is structural. Like in the United States, the average time to see a physician is 11 minutes. Not a lot of time to get into education on what conditions you might be having, whether it's physical or emotional, cognitive, etc. Not a ton of time. But in behavioral health, I see the same thing too, that, I deal with, most of my clients are late teens, early adults. And they're folks often who have had like ADHD or autism diagnoses from a very early age. And I would be so rich if I had money every time that this happened, that I'm like, well, ADHD, you know about it. And they're like, no, I don't. Yeah. And then we spend like an hour just like, let's talk about what it actually is. Yeah. And let's talk about what it looks like, how it manifests through your lifetime. And this is part of the reason we see I think such a trend of ADHD education on TikTok. And there was research that recently came out of the UK that showed 52% of the information on ADHD on TikTok was false.
Oh geez.
Yeah.
There's actually a joke amongst therapists I know that they sound like they heard that one on TikTok. Okay, I got some things to undo.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in the information age, as it were, there's an awful lot to undo.
But those misconceptions, that ends up perpetuating a lot of misconceptions around various diagnoses and what it means, what it looks like, what it doesn't look like. And I want to flip the script a little bit and say that there's a beauty to the fact that there are so many self-advocates out there, and I'm really angry there's a need for that.
Yeah.
I'm angry that self-diagnosis needs to be a thing.
Yeah.
But there's just so much misconception about how mental health challenges manifest in our lives. And yeah, that's just a huge, huge, huge thing that I see in my practice all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think diagnosis can be such a double-edged sword, right? In
Mhm.
the sense that
Yep.
it can be a relief.
Yep.
Like I think when I understood that I was dealing with ADHD, it was a relief to understand that that there's a reason for the behaviors that I'm finding difficult to change.
Mhm.
You know, and certainly knowing that medication was one answer that in my case worked is also really great. Does it change everything? No, but it is actually a useful adjunct. But I think that your diagnosis can also be used against you by
Oh,
those around you. And they don't
100%.
necessarily mean to be unkind, but you can get dismissed because of your diagnosis, or it can be assumed that, say you have depression or ADHD or ASD, that means you're a certain type of person with certain capabilities that are more limited than your capabilities actually are, you know? Or you can be overlooked in terms of perhaps work opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you should get diagnosed where in some way there was an EAP, as in an employment assistance program or something, where we're not always clear who the therapist is working for or who gets to see the notes. So there can be issues there in terms of diagnosis or your own sense of safety or confidentiality around information.
Well, and that ties into a little bit of the misinformation, because now we're getting into the topic of stigma and stereotype.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how many stereotypes exist about different diagnoses. And I want to give I have a standard example I like to give about the diversity that even, quote, simple clinical diagnoses can appear. The diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder in the United States and Canada is 9 symptoms. You have to meet 5 out of 9 in order to be considered to have a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. Somebody did the math on that for me one time on how many permutations you can get with those 9 symptoms when you have to meet only 5 or more. And I think the number was in like 54,000-ish range. So we're talking about over 50,000 potential variations of just something as clinically, and I give this as many air quotes as I can, simple, because depression is so often not simple, and especially in how it affects people's lives, but diagnostically, quote, simple as major depressive disorder. And very frequently, diagnoses don't exist one at a time. The sheer amount of those of us the sheer amount of those of us who are autistic, who have ADHD, who also have anxiety, who also have trauma, who also have depressive episodes.
You start then putting in some of the social experiences we have, or should I say the social context in which we live. We start bringing in intersectionality. We start looking at being of color or being indigenous, or being from a family that struggled financially to make ends meet, to meet needs. All of these things also factor into those experiences and to the kind of care we have access to or not, and will affect then the severity of the symptoms we might experience. Well-managed anxiety and depression look very different than very poorly managed anxiety and depression where we're struggling to survive.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a lot of these hidden impacts. I mean, think about all the systemic stuff that we like to talk about all the time. Lack of access to care. Other people's negative stereotypes about what your diagnosis looks, quote unquote, looks like, when there's no one definitive manifestation of any diagnosis. All of that can contribute to shame, to internalized shame about what we should and should not be doing. I'm going to give a personal example. this is something, being autistic, and ADHD, this is something I struggle with in my relationship. With my partner, I don't emotionally respond to cues the same way other people do. And even if you are autistic or ADHD, you exist in a neurotypical world, and we were taught to date neurotypically. And I've had to really work hard to get over some of the shame about the fact that this is a literal disability for me, and we have to come up with solutions to work around it. I want to be able to do it, and there's a part of me that flips out occasionally because I think I should be able to do it because other people can do it. Why can't I? And that's so often present for so many people.
Yeah. Now, Mitra, you were talking about the, getting diagnosed, finding out how things work and whatnot. I was just like, oh, that's not going to work for me. The thing that I was trying to fix isn't going to work. That was the thing that broke me down the most, because I've said on the shows, like, I got diagnosed when I was in first grade, but I didn't actually find out what ADHD meant until I started doing a show with the two of you. And like, because of Dr. B, I started watching Jess's channel and seeing all the things that I was trying so hard to fix about myself, and finding out that that's just how it is. I just broke down. I had a full-on breakdown about that, because I'm like, I've been trying for a decade to fix these things, and literally all of that was wasted freaking time. And that just broke me. But then now that I know those things, there's this weird stigma I have in my head where, like, I'll tell someone, hey, I meant to text you back. ADHD completely took it out of my brain. Like, and so, like, I tell people now, it's like, that was an ADHD thing. And like, I've legitimately had someone tell me not everything can be ADHD. And I'm like, it literally freaking can be, because that's what's happening to me. And so now I have this stigma in my head of telling people, it's like, would I rather them think I'm a jerk, or over explain something and them get annoyed with me? Which one do I want from them?
Hey, Treavor, I couldn't text you properly because I'm using an iPhone and you're on an Android, and you're like, come on, man, not everything can be about an iPhone.
I know, when we change the dialogue, it absolutely takes away that feeling of, not everything is ADHD, because the thing is, it's true. It's the lens through which I'm often operating, and I can only manage it so well, and I manage it pretty well, but I judge myself super hard for the times I'm not managing it. And it's interesting because the day we were leaving for vacation, I was teaching an online workshop. And it just that's how it landed. We just, that was the day we could start the vacation. We wanted to get going, and I had to do the workshop first, and had had a really busy week leading up, because you want to see people before you go on vacation. And so there was this whole, I have to pack, I have to do this, I have to do that. So we were in a real hurry when we left, and I felt terrible for making us late. Absolutely terrible. And Eric was like, you are doing great. You're doing so much better knowing that this is the thing. You're doing so much better than years ago when you had no idea. You can take it into account. Now when you're late, you're like 10 minutes late. You're not an hour and a half late. Like, we made the ferry. It was all fine, because I couldn't let it go for a while.
Yeah.
Like, this idea that somehow I should be coping better.
There's on the note of the being late thing and that being so tied into ADHD, like, there's this weird thing that my mom instilled in me, because my mom has ADHD and she didn't know, but she got so ridiculed in her younger years that about being late, that she always purposefully was 5 minutes early everywhere, to the point that it was like a panic, and it was instilled in me, and we didn't realize till later. It's like, oh, it's because we got ridiculed for always being late, and so now we drive everyone up the walls when we have to be early, because otherwise we're failing. So
Yep. Well, and I mean, you're bringing up something that's so often, you're bringing up something that is so often covertly or overtly thrown our way, that the fact that we still struggle, the fact that anybody still struggles with mental health challenges or neurodevelopmental diagnoses is because we, quote, don't try hard enough. And it is some like moral failing that we weren't able to, quote, overcome our disabilities. And it is absolutely toxic.
It's so toxic. I'm watching Trevor steaming over there, and that's why I started to smile, because it's like I just see oh.
It is, I mean, the amount going back to this operating system metaphor, just I mean, imagine telling someone, well, I mean, look, they overcame the fact that they are a different operating system and now they're like the rest of us. Why can't you change your operating system? And that is so unreasonable.
Yeah.
Ironically,
absolutely.
I can run their operating system as long as I have red wine. I just put that together in my head. I'm like, oh, that's actually really funny.
I can act not ADHD. I can act like the rest of you people as long as I'm inebriated.
Yes.
But if we're all drinking, it's even better.
I am so much funnier when you've been drinking.
All
I
right,
want that on a t-shirt.
let's take a quick break to remind our viewers of our disclaimer, and then we'll be back to talk a little bit more about this and answer your questions from chat. So be right back.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Okay, so what else do we want to talk about on this topic before checking in with the chat?
Well, I don't know, Trevor, because we're trying so hard right now to be prim and proper and absolutely not scatterbrained in any way, shape, or form. We're going to stay completely on topic.
Yes, we will drink our tea pinky out, indeed.
Oh, pinky out.
Just looking at our notes. We made notes.
We did. Well, what do we do about this?
Yeah, there we go.
What do we do? So one, if you are a clinician out there and you are watching, listening to this or so forth, I just want to say, lean into psychoeducation. Okay. There is so much evidence out there to support its use in empowering clients and empowering their families to know what are the primary and secondary manifestations of various diagnoses. What are strategies that are useful? The empowerment behind education cannot be understated. And so if you are a clinician, if you are a behavioral health provider, if you are a medical provider, educate your clients, period. And you know what? If you're a client, ask for it. It's your treatment.
Absolutely. Do not assume, if you're a clinician, that your client knows all about the various facets of their diagnoses, how these may have affected them through the course of their life, and how in particular they may be affecting them now, because it's your task to also bring the diagnosis, the person, and their context together.
100%. It's when it comes to some of the stigma, also support organizations that you like that make a difference in regards to this, because taking individual action against systemic stressors is hard. Now, there are organizations out there, and I'm take this as not the only one. I'm biased. I think we do, amazing work, but there are other really wonderful organizations that are trying to fight systemic challenges, like NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness in the United States. Support the organizations that are doing the work you want to see done. That's a big one.
Okay.
Let's see. Wait a minute. Oh, another thing. Find your people. Find your community.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Surround yourself with people who support you as is.
That's why in my Twitter bio I put hashtag ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just
Yeah.
like, hey, just know this about me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are my common tips for people who, what do we do to fight these mental health impacts, or these hidden impacts of the diagnoses or conditions or whatever terminology we use that so many of us struggle with.
Help people understand, if you're a mental health clinician, and for you individually to understand, if you're experiencing a mental health diagnosis, that a diagnosis is not an excuse. They're different things. We can take care of our diagnoses. We can understand that it takes up space, and that is also okay. That is not an excuse. It's a fact of our life.
Yeah.
I have ADHD. Also, it happens to be raining out. These are two things that are true. It's
just because
not...
I'm in Seattle.
Exactly. The wet coast. So I think that the thing is, we often tend to shy away from talking about our experience with whatever diagnosis we have, because we're afraid people will think we're using it as an excuse, or people will start to, in some way, discriminate against us.
Right.
But the best, if we're feeling courageous and if we have good people in our lives, the best way to help people understand is to share our experience. And it's also the best way for us to be understood.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true. If we can, one of the things I want to acknowledge in that for a lot of folks is that some of us are in job positions, some of us are in industries that's so heavily stigmatized, and ironically, mental health is one of those areas where self-disclosing, because there's a long history against self-disclosures in mental health settings. Now, there's a reason to not center the conversation on yourself, but self-disclosures aren't necessarily centering the conversation about yourself. There are ways that are appropriate to be able to use those therapeutically. And the fact that I'm autistic and I work with ADHD, and I work with a lot of folks who are autistic and ADHD, it is a different ball game when they know I know what they're talking about on a very intimate level. Absolutely. Yeah. So don't cut off your humanity. That's the other thing. If you're a mental health professional, I really want to talk to you. Don't cut off your humanity. Bring it into the session.
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a way to bring it into the discussion when it's really relevant to clients. And I think anytime we're using self-disclosure, we need to be thinking about how relevant this is to clients.
You need to be careful.
Yeah. I don't want, your ADHD is not my ADHD and all that, as we know. We look at all these different permutations of the experience that we can have. However, for someone to understand that there are aspects of it I get on a very personal level can be helpful. And we have to be careful. I don't ever want a client to think I'm inserting my experience into the session.
God, no. Self-disclosures are powerful. And I think that I wish more mental health professionals used them appropriately, instead of just shying away entirely from it. Because again, there's even within the mental health professional, there's stigma against, there's stigma against revealing diagnoses. So I don't know. I want to see a lot of systemic changes. I mean, that's always my bias.
It's fair. Any other things that we want to touch on before checking in with chat?
I don't know. I don't have anything, Mitra.
I was looking at our notes.
So am I. I'm looking at the notes, and then part of me needs to
actually, we could quickly talk about that study I mentioned yesterday. So there is more and more obviously coming out in terms of research, particularly with autism and ADHD, because these are kind of buzzwords the way schizophrenia was in the 60s, I guess, it's just misunderstood, and everything that we don't understand goes into those buckets. And so some of the research that's coming out, we really need to question how well the research was done. So a recent study was looking at adolescents who had been diagnosed. And I use the term diagnosis loosely here. So they'd been diagnosed with ADHD, and what they were looking at was, did early diagnosis in childhood actually improve quality of life for these now adolescents?
Oh, yeah.
So they looked at some who'd been diagnosed, and they looked at some who hadn't been diagnosed, and they concluded that there wasn't much of a difference. And several things occurred to me about that. First of all, who's doing the diagnosing? And they didn't actually check into, is this an official diagnosis? Was there a pediatrician or a pediatric psychiatrist involved, or was it just a parent thinking this was going on, right? They also didn't look at use of medication. And most important, they didn't really. And they also didn't look at psychoeducation.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, diagnosis can absolutely make things worse if you do nothing with it.
Well, that was the thing. It's like the question I had as well. It's like,
right?
Did they tell them what the diagnosis meant? Because I know I wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think so. And also, I think that I don't know how much education there. This was basically looking at through the lens of school experience. I really don't know what education the teachers received in order to understand and help support those kids. So diagnosis doesn't make it better unless we go the extra mile, either for ourselves or for those around us who are being diagnosed, with support, possibly medication, understanding, psychoeducation, further research, right? These are all key components of diagnosis.
It's like this is
being
complicated.
Useful. Yeah, it's like, oh, hey, here's this old trunk I got from the attic, and I'm going to put it right in your hallway. Now you're going to have to walk around it, and we all know there's a trunk there.
Oh,
but
don't worry, I won't even notice it's there.
I'm going to look at it. I'm going to know. I'm not going to help you with it. I'm not going to help you understand what the contents are.
Well, I want can I throw something into this conversation that just came up in chat?
Yeah.
Yellow Straw mentioned that it's likely a diagnosis will be dependent on the level of severity more than a moderate impact. That's actually, there's a misconception around that I want to address. And that's the idea that mild diagnoses don't have a major impact. When people talk, in order to receive a diagnosis, it has to already be of such severity and impact that it's getting in the way of a person's ability to function. So a mild anxiety disorder is only in relative clinical terms. And the metaphor I use for that very frequently is if you imagine it on a scale of 1 to 10, and that's the severity, impact on a person's life. 1 through 5 is standard, what we'd expect. 6 through 10 is the clinical range, and mild diagnoses are already in that 6 and 7 range. And so this is one of those examples, and this is why psychoeducation is so important, where clinical language is not the same as everyday language, and we don't always make that a bit well known. And so someone who has a mild anxiety disorder or mild major depressive disorder already has a major impact in their life. That doesn't make it confusing at all, does it? No, I didn't think so. That's why we have this show.
Yeah. So we use mild, moderate, and severe very differently than the way you and I would use it to talk about rain.
Yeah, mild rain is what
if you forget your umbrella, it's not the end of the world, right?
What I considered mild rain in Southern California is much different.
and I think context also changes how we experience a diagnosis, because how are we able to cope with the diagnosis? What does life expect of us? Right? So a mild anxiety disorder might be very, very manageable if I'm single, relatively wealthy, probably white, and maybe male, right? A mild anxiety disorder if I'm a woman of color, raising my children alone, and trying to do this in the context of having, say, 2 jobs. Forget that. Can you just see how different that would be for a person's experience, right?
Context is so important.
Yeah. Do I have family support? Something mild might actually be more mild. Am I on my own and trying to cope with whatever varying complexities exist in my life. Mild is actually more
I-
like moderate in its impacts, or maybe even severe.
I do like what someone put in the chat. A mild monsoon is still a monsoon.
Yes!
Yes!
That's,
Well
I think that's
said.
the perfect way of
Yes!
saying it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Oh
It's just
my
like,
God,
Nice.
that is brilliant.
Yeah. So the wind isn't taking the
don't-
roof off any
yeah.
houses. We're good. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
It's
no.
only shattered glass
Yeah.
across the village.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's check in with chat and see what they have been up to. We're gonna start with Samuel K. Kaufman. Question: do either of you deal with autism typically? And this was as from like a doctor standpoint, or
Yeah.
like patient. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was funny. It was my clients who spotted it before anybody else.
That's
and
incredible.
No, it was actually funny. I worked with so much autism long before I was diagnosed. And it should have been a red flag that some of the interfacing skills I was teaching the clients I was working with were based on my own experiences and learning how to, people. And it should have been a red flag in retrospect. But some of the kids I worked with were like, "But you get it, you're autistic," and I'm like, "What? No, no."
Oh, late diagnosis, man. Yeah, my one of my kids was diagnosed before I was in terms of ADHD, and then I was able to really start putting it into context. And for those of you who saw the recent episode where I talked about my report card, I mean, if there ever was enough red flags for ADHD, it was right there. But yeah, who knew?
Yep.
So-
Needs to try harder.
Oh God, all the time.
Needs to
If
apply
only
themselves.
applied self.
Oh
Yes.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
second circle of ADHD hell, the report card.
Oh, God.
Man, I want to make up the 9 circles of ADHD hell. I might
Yeah,
do
we
that
should do
later
that.
today.
I've been working on it for autism for years. First circle of autism hell, Costco.
Oh God, that's right. It would
Especially when
be.
you get to the back right corner of any Costco where everybody is intersecting.
Why do I
their
know
carts,
exactly what
and
you
you
mean?
round that corner
You're
and
also
everybody's
not
going back
neurotypical,
to the meat
Trevor.
department, and then there's the parking lot.
Oh God, parking lots. ADHD in parking lots. Don't even get me started. School parking lots as a parent. It's just anyway. First
boy.
experience ever.
Yes, they do. I don't, because I'm not I'm not a professional. Don't take my advice. Gelatinous Rubik's Cube. What a name.
I love it. I love it.
The best.
I'm not sure if this is one that we can answer, but I will read it out. Which I was recently willing to get counseling, but even with insurance, working for a hospital, one session was $400 out of pocket. Is that considered reasonable?
Yeah.
Depends.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can't say because I'm not in the American healthcare system, but I am outraged on your behalf. It's like-
It depends. And it depends on a lot of different factors. There's a lot of folks who can charge on sliding scale. There's some folks who don't. I'm going to call myself out on this. I don't actually have any sliding scale or for my private practice, because my private practice is supplementary to my nonprofit work, which doesn't pay me market rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to make a living income somehow. So I'm in some cases more expensive than other people. And depending on the level of education that you're dealing with, 10 master's level practitioners in the United States tend to be a little less than psychologists, at least in most places that I know of. Psychiatrists tend to be even more than psychologists. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors at work. And if you're in a major metropolitan area like Seattle, we're more expensive because the cost of living is higher. So yeah, there's a lot of different. If you were to tell me I was in San Francisco and it was $400 for an intake, I would be like, yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Oh boy. Well, I hope that helps you out in some
Sorry.
way. Yeah. Let's see. This is Caliph Maron? I don't know how to say the last one. Question. I'm curious why there is so much help for kids and teens, but not adults. That just seems strange to me.
Ah,
I mean, I
well,
have an observation about this, and I'm curious to see what y'all have to say.
You want to start on this one, Mitra?
sure. I mean, I think that this is where, and when you say help, do you mean, I'm curious if you mean in terms of through the school system or public mental health funding,
Yeah, maybe
or
just even just getting diagnosed.
getting diagnosed. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think this is where perhaps we feel we can really make a difference, which is not to say we can't make a difference with adults, but I think first of all, there's more information, more knowledge now. We know what to look for with kids. I think there is less stigma around diagnosing for kids than there used to be. I think parents are coming to understand what a difference it might make to their kids' perspective on themselves as a learner.
Mhm.
Provided you actually do the work of explaining more to the kid about why are you taking this medication, there's a lot of things that we kind of need to explicate better. But that's where you can really make a difference, I think, in terms of a person's learning path. If you can interrupt the negative process and associations with school, we can have better outcomes career-wise as a person, just in terms of our own feelings about ourselves. So
there's also so depending on what help you're looking for, like if we're talking about autism and ADHD, most of the research has been done historically on children, specifically white cis male children.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of implications around that systemically, but also there are laws often in place to provide supports for disabilities, and especially neurodevelopmental disabilities for kids, in a way that adults just don't have in the United States.
Yeah.
There's technically there's congressional parity on insurance for mental health care versus physical health care, but it's often not enforced.
Yeah. I think kids are observed more as well. Kids are observed in school. So we can actually see and notice behavior in children that adults have learned to mask.
One of the things that I heard from someone who was talking to me negatively about ADHD was essentially use the thing of their firsthand observation of that the only time they had heard about ADHD and autism was when a kid was diagnosed with it. And so to them, they were like, that's a kid thing.
That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turns out ADHD kids and autistic kids grow up to be ADHD and autistic adults.
Grow up? What? I thought this was Peter Pan.
Yeah. You do not grow out of it. Yeah. You do not.
I've been told that so many times that you just grow out of it. I'm like, no, you don't.
No, our operating systems stay the same.
You just mask better.
Yeah.
You maybe have more tools.
Yeah.
You maybe choose how much you take on, right? Like a kid with ADHD or autism might not be able to cope with a full day of school with a lot of stimulation.
Oh my God.
An adult will choose to not do that if they have a choice. That makes their life easier in terms of masking.
No.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think about the fact that what high school looks like for most of the kids I work with, and the idea of being in class, especially given what we know about ADHD, autism, and sleep phase delay and different chronotypes. The fact that they have to be in class at like 7:30 in the morning, and they get like half an hour for lunch and 15-minute breaks every like 2 periods. Otherwise, they're in their bloody seats and they have to pay attention, switch tasks, and all of that for 6 hours a day. I'm looking at that going, well, I don't do that to my employees.
So the schools in my area recently made it a law that schools now start at 8 a.m. Because they started at 7 a.m. before that. And essentially the lawmaker that put it out was just like, you cannot be yelling at these kids to get more sleep and then make them start school at 7 in the morning.
No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We're purely for time reason. I'm gonna do only one of the other questions. Samuel Kaufman, your other question I have already highlighted, and we will go over in our season finale in a couple weeks. I don't remember what episode we're on anymore.
Hold on, I wrote this down.
But while you look at
66.
66. Oh, so we got. Oh my gosh.
Oh, the poor Jedi.
Caliph comes back. It's with a quick question. Are any of you going to PAX Unplugged? I'd like to meet you if you are.
Yep.
Yeah,
Not me, sadly.
I am not either, but Dr. B is going to be there. And I don't know. You have things going on there?
Yeah, I got a couple panels I'm on.
Yeah, a couple things. So
the AFK room we plan on bringing back. To PAX Unplugged. PAX Unplugged is one of my favorite shows. I love getting to go when I can. Yeah, I'll be on a couple panels, I hear.
Yeah, so be sure to follow Dr. B on Twitter to see what panels those are and when they're going to be.
Yep.
But I think that is a good place to start wrapping up this episode. Friends, people want to find you on the interwebs. Where could they do so?
They can find me at mitrajordan.com or on Twitter at Mitra Jordan.
I'm around. I'm on things at the places with the people. I'm often there, just being the consigliere to a lot of things. I don't know. You can find me at the Dr. B, TheEDoctorB as in boy, on most social media platforms. But more importantly, follow TakeThis.org. Stay up to date on what we're doing, what we're up to. We've just put out some really amazing new resources on our resource page, some burnout resources for content creators, all of it for free.
If you see a tall man with long hair and a nice big hat, it's probably Dr. B.
He really is quite tall. He's taller than you think.
Is that?
He's just the same height as me sitting down. I assure you, when he stands up. Anyway.
Is that the top hat from Dracula? You look like you're gonna go try to get Winona Ryder to come back to a castle with you. Armstrong! Yeah, there we go.
My old theater troupe had a sale, and this was the hat I wore at Oliver.
Oh, was it? Oh, that's so perfect. Well, now you look like Gary
Oldman.
You look like Gary Oldman there. Yeah. Well done.
Willy Wonka too. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to our mods, Mars and Jordan, for moderating the chat and doing a fantastic job. Thank you to Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these discussions. I believe everything is normal for this week, normal as far as the schedule goes. So be sure to check out our Twitter, Reddit, and Discord for the lineup for the rest of the streams for the week. But that is going to do it for this week's episode. So until next week, take care of yourself.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.